Uh, okay, can you hear me? Can you? Yeah. Okay. Yes. Yeah, it's working? Okay. It is. Actually, come like here. So we have it like in between, or do we have to like? Okay, okay. So like to make sure. Oh yeah, it is. I'll give it to you. Okay. Regardless of the so then Mark will say a bit. Okay, yeah, yeah, they can see. Yeah. And if I wanted to say something. I'll just like give it back to you like when I finish. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that's the better. It's so funny how they make fun of means so much. It's this contract. I think that's what science has to see where it's about true. And then you're thinking about two brothers fighting with each other. It's just ridiculous. It reminded me of my husband. It was just their stories of growing up. Great sports boys, like I always compare them silly about silly. No, it's like one of the not road, like for that part, should I sit somewhere else? Then it was all worse in some ways because it might be like you're something like suicide. Yeah. Like I'm so glad. I always just saw it once, so I really like it. It is really powerful. And all that I did was my second time. Never getting on the mic, and I've been doing it 30 years. It's really embarrassing. Because I love consulting arts. Go see lots of other stuff.
Okay, are you ready to make introductions?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna introduce the event and ask everyone to apply for the Okay, everyone, thank you so much for coming today. So this is our special event celebrating the release of Retrograde by Osamu Dazai, translated by Leo Elizabeth Takada. Yes, round of applause. And thank you so much to everyone here in person today. And also, this is a technological experiment. It's very DIY, as you can see, and we're live streaming the event. So hopefully all of our remote participants can hear as well. We might need to adjust some technology midway through if there's a problem. But yeah, the Ryozan Park Lounge has been very gracious in hosting us, so I would kindly ask all of you to purchase a food and a drink item at some point during the program today, and there should be enough time. So we also have some copies of Retrograde that you can buy. We'll have them on sale after the event is over. So I'm going to hand it over to Leo to introduce the book and the event. So a big round of applause, please.
Okay, good morning, everyone, and good evening for those people watching online. I'm Leo Elizabeth Takada, the translator of Retrograde.
Project more if you can.
Project?
speak louder.
Okay.
Oh, so the mic is for the Zoom, for the online. Sorry. For people in this room, I'll ask if we'll ask our participants to speak as loudly as they can and just be quiet to be able to tune in. Yes, if we really can't hear, we'll also use the mic in this room, but it'll be easier if we don't. So yeah.
Or maybe it's better to use the microphone.
You think so? Let's see.
Okay, we're gonna have a microphone set up for this room. Thank you. Okay. Okay. 大丈夫かな? Okay, so this is our new book. Can you see? Published by One Piece Books, and I'm also a bilingual poet, but today I'm mainly here as a translator who just spent a year with Dazai and finished living with his voice. And this is my first full-length translation book in English. And my first encounter with Dazai. Well, as a Japanese growing up in Japan and in the UK, well, like in a sense, my own translation was the first like English version of Dazai I ever read. And if you grow up in like Japan, like everyone meets Dazai in their like middle school like Japanese language and literature classes and read Ron Mello's Hashira Merosu. That's the book we first read. And later, many of us go on and then read No Longer Human and get shocked by how different it sounds. And so for like many Japanese readers, Dazai is like your old friend, whether you like him or not. And some people feel close to him, and others like only remember his name. But there's like always a sense of familiarity. And this closeness has a lot to do with his writing style. And so this translation was like turning Dazai from a friend speaking in Japanese into a friend speaking to me in English. And one of the hardest part was the use of first-person pronoun. Well, in Japanese, there are like many, and Dazai like shifts between them to signal character and is their like identity and even like irony or distance. But in English, we basically only have like like one choice. So I had to find another way to carry those like nuances, and also the intimacy he creates like between the narrative and the readers. Well, like in Japanese, it's built in certain cultural ways, and I had to find how to restage that for English readers. So the challenge was how do you like recreate not just the words but the experience of that story. And and another memory I have from my teenage years is that No Longer Human or Shameful Life suddenly became a bestseller because the manga artist of Death Note designed the book cover. And today Dazai is also popular thanks to Bungo Stray Dogs. And in the English-speaking world, people often focus on his tragic biography, like almost like the 27 Club rock icons, like Kurt Cobain. But whether you like him or not, Dazai feels very familiar, like someone you know. And maybe for Gen Zs, it's more like a influencer rather than this like iconic novelist. So in this panel, we're explore translation not only as a technical practice, but as a way of restaging Dazai's intimacy and contradictions for new readers, and also reimagining the place of Japanese literature today. Yes, so that's what we're gonna talk about in the next panels. And before we move on, I want to thank a few people. First, Eric, the editor of this book, and also the organizer of the event today. We spent like hours, like several like sessions, like proofreading and thinking about how to make all these like pronouns like sound good in English and had like the localization choices. So we did a great amount of work together actually. Yeah, it was very fun. So thank you. And also thanks to Motoyuki Shibata, who introduced me to Eric. So in that sense, he matched the translator and the editor perfectly and the work. And to Roland Kelts, who's maybe watching online, he's also the editor of the Monkey magazine, who kind of provided the blurb for this book. So those three were the ones I had the privilege to work with directly, and I know that many people were involved in making this book. So thanks to everyone, and finally, thank you to everyone here, because books never exist without readers. So it's all work. So yeah, thank you. So this is everyone's work. So yeah, we did it. Thank you. Arigatou gozaimasu.
Thank you so much, Leo, for the introduction. So I want to briefly introduce the wonderful panelists that we have today. So in addition to Leo, who translated Retrograde, we moderating our first panel about how to translate Osamu Dazai is Sarah Sherweedy, a PhD candidate at Bunkyo Gakuen University, who is researching translating Dazai's work. She's translated Dazai into Arabic and English, analyzing his narrative techniques and the influence of Japanese traditional storytelling like rakugo and gidayu on his work. Thank you very much, Sarah, for agreeing to moderate this event for us. Also joining us remotely for this first panel is Allison Markin Powell, a literary translator, editor, and publishing consultant. She has translated Schoolgirl by Osamu Dazai for us at One Piece Books, as well as many works. I am sure you've seen her name. She also received the 2020 PEN America Translation Prize for The 10 Loves of Nishino by Hiromi Kawakami. Thank you so much for joining us remotely, Allison. And lastly, for this first panel, joining us, we have Mark Gibeau, a lecturer of Japanese language and culture in the School of Cultural History and Languages at the Australian National University. In addition to teaching, he is also an accomplished literary translator himself. He translated A Shameful Life by Osamu Dazai for Stonebridge Press and has also worked on Kobo Abe, Murakami Haruki, and many other writers. Thank you very much for joining us, Mark. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sarah for our first panel.
I may try to speak. Can you hear me? Can everybody hear? Okay, maybe I can use this as well. Okay. Thank you for the introduction. I'm very glad to be here, not just as someone who's doing research on Dazai and been obsessing over his narrative for the past 5 years, but also as someone who does enjoy reading Dazai. And I just like reading your translation and seeing people trying to bring his voice into other languages has been a pleasure, even just as a reader. So I would like to start my discussion with a question that's like kind of a three-part question. So first, I want to ask all three of you as translators. How were you first introduced to Dazai's writings? And as you began translating him, what was the thing that you felt that you need to keep in mind the most? Whether that be something that you noticed at the beginning of the translation or as you went through the process of translating him. And finally, what stands out when it comes to his style of writing? You mentioned a little bit about his narrative voice, which is also something that I do care about, and we'll ask him a little bit more. But for each of you, having translated different writings, one's written in a female first-person narrative, and other different types of writings. So if we can start with Leo.
Well, the first question is like the difficult question. Well, as I said, my first encounter with Dazai was my middle school textbook. Not in Japan actually, because I was in the UK going to Saturday schools in Edinburgh, and the class was actually taught by my dad. So I read Dazai with my dad, Hashira Middle School. And actually, my mom did a thesis on that back in college. So Dazai was the kind of like a family affair thing for me. So that was my encounter. And when I started my translation, that was kind of like a reunion with Dazai after 20 years. And I think it's the first persons and the pronouns that was like very difficult, a very challenging thing to do for me, because he switches his first persons for the same character in Retrograde. Like he starts off talking about this guy in third person, and in the second part it's Ware, and then in the second and the third is Boku. And in the fourth is his childhood, so he looks all different. And that was the thing I hadn't really noticed when I was just reading the original Japanese. It's just it's a challenge I faced when I tried to translate him. And while I was reading, I was like, "No, stop! You can't do this. If you want to like stay friends with me, you cannot do this to me." But he ignored me and went on, so I had to find a way. And I don't know whether I've succeeded, but Eric has helped me a lot going through that, and I think we try to do that through like English dictions and like the pace of how the sentence reads and all that stuff to pick up the nuances. And while I was doing that, I did realize that the main theme, well, at least how I felt about like Dazai's narratives, was his identity. His identity and how he's like torn between his like ideal self and the reality, and how he can like reconcile on how he fails. And we can see that through his first person singular, but you cannot do that in English. So that was the difficult part I faced. Yes.
How Allison and Mark, Mark, maybe okay. Because since Leo just talked about pronouns, you see that quite often in Ningen Shikaku, which you translated as a shameful life. And then after that, I would also like to go to Allison.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard following Leo because she's saying all the good stuff. But yeah, in Ningen Shikaku, I had a similar problem because in the main narrative, it's jibun throughout, right? The first person pronoun. And in the sort of bracketing narrative, this person who discovers the manuscript, basically, he uses watashi, and it's very consistent. And so I tried to play around with that. And, I mean, what jibun? I mean, I don't know. I'm not a native Japanese speaker, so the nuance of jibun versus watashi versus boku and so on is not that obvious to me. But I did talk to a lot of people. And I mean, the only sort of rendition of Gibeau I could come up with was oneself. And, that would just be agonizing to read a novel where the protagonist refers to himself as oneself throughout. So, um, yeah, I abandoned that. And I don't think I came up with, I mean, I guess like Leo, those kinds of nuances that are embedded in words that don't translate. I really just tried to recreate through the overall tone of the narration and the speech and so on. And then as far as, well, when I encountered Dazai, I first read him when I was an undergraduate in translation, and I admit I didn't get it. So as a genre of literature I wasn't accustomed to. I was, really focused on sort of 19th century European novels at that point, and I didn't understand the whole I-novel thing. And so I put him aside for many years and then came back to him uh, after coming to the ANU and working with students. I have a reading group, and then I discovered, how really good he is. And yeah, when I saw those, page long, multiple page long sentences, where there's like two or three parenthetical asides and shifting subjects and so on, I thought that would be really interesting to translate. Um, and it was extremely frustrating, but very interesting. But yeah, I think I've talked enough. Thank you.
So yeah, I think my experience is perhaps different translating Schoolgirl. But actually going back to the beginning of this question, I believe that my first introduction was in grad school when I read Shayo, actually was the first book by Dazai that I read. And I enjoyed that. I think then, I don't think it was part of the class, but then I did go on to read Ningen Shikaku myself, and probably in English though. And then, so the opportunity to translate Joseito, Schoolgirl, came with One Piece books. So this was very early on in the era of One Piece books. It had sort of just gotten, it was relatively new publisher, and they were still operating in New York City. And I met Robert, and at the time, I think Glenn Anderson was an editor there. And we talked about, I remember sitting in the office and talking about the modern Japanese classics line, and that this would be the first, volume in that series. So it was a really exciting opportunity. And I mean, I think what was kind of interesting, I mean, one of the things I want to ask, I definitely would like to hear from Mark about retranslating something that, or, translating something that's already pretty well known out there. I mean, as it happens, Schoolgirl did exist previously, but there weren't really very many. The translations were not very accessible to me living in the States at the time when I was translating this. And my translation, I think, came out in 2011. So it's actually quite a while ago. It's kind of hard to remember exactly. I mean, I do remember that it was a struggle, that it was a challenge, but the specific challenges are kind of distant to me now. But it was so much about the voice of this young girl and capturing that, and not just the voice, but the consistent, or there's a tone that's like, up and down the stream of consciousness, and trying to like recreate that, I think, was the challenge. And it, the way that Leo was talking about, it's like a friend, and you have to find that colloquial tone that's, somehow appropriate for being written, in this case in 1939, and that will still be relevant to readers in, well, 2011 at the time when I was translating. So yeah, I think that was a kind of a precarious balance, I think. And I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay. Mark, would you like to comment on what Allison just asked about? Like, I know you've done like a podcast on this, talking about translate with. I've listened to the podcast, and I know that you did that last year, talking about translating something that was already out there, also by Donald Keene, and how that must have been a struggle. If you would like to comment on that.
Yeah, I'm surprised people have listened to the podcast, but thank you. Yeah, I mean, I guess I could just sum it up by saying it's terrifying. You know, I didn't plan to translate Dazai. It just kind of happened. So it started off with a reading group, and then it turned into kind of like a translation drinking group. And then it just took on a life of its own. I ended up doing a ridiculous number of drafts, in part because I was so terrified of how people would read it, if anybody read it. I didn't actually shop it around to publishers until it was essentially done, because I don't plan very well. But yeah, it's funny. So I brought it to Stonebridge and they said no first. And then I brought it to Columbia and they sent it out for readers, and some of the I mean, I got lots of very useful feedback, but some of it was, you know, kind of admonishing me for having the gall to try to retranslate Keene, which now is kind of funny. I mean, I get it. I felt kind of the same way. But I did feel that his English had aged and Dazai's hadn't. And as Leo and Allison said, you know, the sort of sense of intimacy is so integral to the text. I thought it deserved to be updated, and whether or not I was the best person to do it is a, you know, a different issue. But I didn't read Keene. I deliberately stayed away from Keene until after I was done. And then I thought, well, you know, yeah, he does certain things better, and I think I did certain things better. And I found one big mistake in his book, so I was like, yes, suck it, Donald. But yeah. Anyway, sorry, I'm rambling now, so I'll stop. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, this takes me to my next question. You mentioned the intimacy that you see in Dazai's narrative, and this was also something that you mentioned in the podcast when you said that reading it after 70 years in Japanese, the voice still felt very immediate. And Leo also, in her afterwards, you mentioned that Dazai talks to you like a friend, and this happens in a lot of his narratives, even the female first-person narratives as well. And this happens through the use of what is referred to sometimes as implicit second person, basically just using a lot of you, second person, dear readers at times. So Dazai basically and very clearly and openly, he manipulates the footing of the reader quite often, moving between first, second, third person pronouns quite a lot. So how did you mentioned a little bit about it, but how, if you can go back a little bit to that and think, how did you do it? And if you can go back, how would you redo it? Like now that the translation is out, how would you, I like to say restage, because I believe that Dazai's narrative are very performative. So how would you, as a co-performer, not just a translator, how did you go about it, and how would you, if you were to change anything about it, how would you do that?
It's like another difficult question. How did I do it? Well, one thing I really kept in my mind was to make him sound like your friend, because that's like how you feel when you read the original Japanese. And at the time when it was published, it probably like did really sound like your friend. And now when we like look back, of course the Japanese is a bit old, and maybe you don't know about the places he's talking about, even if you're like Japanese living in Tokyo. But you still feel this sense of like for your like friend talking to you casually. So you need to like recreate that in the translation. And how did I do it? Not sure. Well, like even when I was like reading the original Japanese, like he really did like remind me of like some of my friends back in college. Maybe like one of your like annoying friends, but he really like resembled them. So it was more like imagining if like what if I went to college in the US and had this kind of friend like talking to you and like chasing around you and doing all the like push and pull and kind of like a relationship? How would they talk to me? So it was like more like that kind of like imagination rather than like working on this like very specific like grammatical details. It was like that kind of effect, like shooting a film in the US, like based on Japanese novel. That was like the sort of sense I had myself. Yeah.
How about Allison and Mark?
I mean, it's what the sense that I'm having as we're talking about this today. I mean, I feel like I was kind of blissfully, not saying that I didn't pay attention when I was doing the translation, but I think I went into it like, without knowing what I was getting myself into. And so I feel like, if I could go back over, I mean, it was many years that I didn't reread the translation. Like I was aware that there was maybe some typos in it. And so in the edition that we had that had been published, and I think it was when Sam Betts' Flowers of Buffoonery came out a couple of years ago, and he invited me to do an event with him in New York, and it gave me the opportunity to reread it. And I was like, sort of bracing myself, but then my translation, I mean, I was rereading my translation and it was like, oh, okay, there aren't that many typos. And I mean, I don't think that I may be wrong, but I don't think that Joseito has exactly the same it has the same questions, it has these same issues of because it's definitely not using boku. And so I think, I mean, I was actually reading, I just read something today online. Somebody was talking about a way to sort of deal with the everything that's going on in the world, and a way to sort of get through their day was to dissociate. And using dissociation, like the means of dissociating was to sort of think about yourself in the third person. And I just thought that that was so, as I knew that these were some of the issues that would come up in our conversation today. And I was like, was that what Dazai was doing? And is that something that maybe we should think about as we read, as we discuss? Um, what do you think, Mark?
On Ariaki Shizu's diaries. So there was that, like Dazai's, it's not exactly Dazai's direct voice, but he's also kind of interpreting someone's voice and putting it. And then as a translator, you get to see those two layers of somebody else's voice that then Dazai adapted. So
Absolutely, yeah. Like it was very clear from having read the other, having read Shayo and Ningen Shikaku, that like this was a very different style. And so, yeah, right, exactly.
okay, thank you. If I can go to my next question. I know we talked. Oh, sorry. Oh my God, Mark. If you could please answer.
It's okay. I'm happy to go with the flow. Well, first, I would never go back and try to do it again. I mean, I think I did like 11 or 12 drafts of it, and no, I never want to open that can of worms up again. So I just have to live with it. But in terms of the voice and the intimacy, and I think particularly, at least, I mean, not just Ningen Shikaku, but particularly in Ningen Shikaku, it's really central to the narrative. I think it's central to the irony that ties the book together. So it's this notion that he can't reveal his true self to anybody as he writes this narrative that's going to be published to everybody. As he uses words to say, you just can't trust words, and things like that. So he's creating this illusion of immediacy and candor and sincerity, but it's ironic throughout, and that's what makes it so fascinating for me. I mean, I think there's a lot of humor in the book, and it's something that my students, I think, worry about me when I say that. But I think there's a lot. I mean, it's a dark humor, and it's a subtle humor, but a lot of it, again, it ties into that intimacy, and that was one of the reasons why I thought it was due for a retranslation. And I don't know. I mean, maybe with Keen's English, it wasn't just the age of the English, but the style of English, and I don't know, the different class backgrounds and educational backgrounds and so on, that just, I didn't feel it the first time I read it, which granted was a very long time ago. But yeah, anyway, I thought in contrast, I thought his translation of Shayo, the kind of older style English, worked really, really well in Shayo. So I would never attempt that. I think he did a fantastic job on that. But anyway, yeah, that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. I think as you said, like there is humor even in that narrative, and I do believe that there's also humor in the way that he kind of like, as Leo also said, like there's that push and pull relationship. He nudges the reader, asks the reader sometimes for forgiveness, attack the reader at other times. So what I find, and like when I tried to translate Dazai myself, that was the difficult thing for me. Like, how do I bring that into Arabic? Because also in Arabic, we don't use that many pronouns just because the subject goes into the verb itself. And then I was like, okay, let me just put the translation aside and let me do some research. And then I ended up doing it for 5 years. So within that process, what I found very interesting is that translators like yourselves would talk quite often about Dazai's craftsmanship. You talk about his style. But when it comes to scholarship, that you don't see that often in the Anglophone. In Japan, that has been debated for a very long time. But when it comes to the Anglophone, again, there's often that image of Dazai as, like you say, Dazai suicide, Dazai I novel. So how did you go about that, and where do you stand on this? Like, how do you think translations can either reinforce or resist this notion of Dazai, then nihilism, suicide, and so on and forth? We start with Leo.
Okay. Well, I think it's generally the same for like Japanese readers too, to like picture Dazai as kind of like an artist icon with these like all his like negative sides and his despairs and the suicide and everything. And I think especially for Dazai, it's like hard to distinguish his protagonist and himself, because it's like multiples of him, like in different versions, talking to us. So I guess it's like a long time debate we're like having in the area of critique, that whether the like author's dead or not, and whether to like focus on the work itself or to like study about the author's biography to like really interpret and understand the work. And for Dazai, it's like I think it's especially difficult because his like characters, his protagonist and himself is just so close. And it's almost like he's trying to get himself across, like through his characters. He wants like himself to be like understood by the readers. So that's what he's doing. Like, so he's more like a musician, as like a singer. Because if you hear a song and you hear like you listen to someone singing with like like first person, you cannot like really distinguish between the songs like narrative, the character, and the singer, and that's like very happening with Dazai. too, like compared to like other authors who like really takes a distance between themselves and the novel. And yeah, that's it for me.
Sorry, I don't know about Allison, but I can't hear anything.
Oh, can you hear now? Okay. I asked how about Allison, like where do you stand in this and as a translator? Also considering the fact that Dazai have been like there's almost more than 70 titles now in English translated, some of them translated multiple times. And there's more to come, and also considering how social media and popular culture are helping reimagine Dazai. So within all of that, where do you stand and how do you think translation could resist or could reinforce a specific image for Dazai?
It is a really interesting question. I think that again, like I think I feel like my experience is a little different because it's some time ago. And like Dazai's stature, his status in the Anglophone world has changed so dramatically in recent years, that really didn't that wasn't the case. It was really only people who had much of any familiarity with Japan who would have heard of him. And so I feel like I mean, again, I'm not a scholar, I'm not an academic, so I do remember having active conversations with the editors at One Piece about that. Like this was not this was not a scholarly text, this was not academic, this was for a general reader. And again, like the fact that there weren't any the existing translations of this book were not really available in the US at that time. So so it was really, we were trying to make it very accessible. And yeah, and I think, I mean, it's funny to what happened, and because I don't really do social media, or I don't do social media, I don't do it at all. So I was like, I knew that this was, I became aware that this was happening, and people were, I mean, I think I'm not sure exactly where I heard about it from, but I do remember, like, the publisher being like, what's going on? I remember running into Barbara Epler, who's the publisher of New Directions, the publisher of Donald Keynes, No Longer Human, and just being like, what's going on here? And, trying to explain it, because as the numbers were just climbing and climbing and climbing. And it's been really interesting to see how that's made editors and publishers, and we can talk about this I guess in the second panel too, like it's made people sort of hunger for more, looking out for the more Dazai, trying to, I mean, and the Dazai has sort of, it's been these more obscure or out of print books have been out there, but people are seeking his work and wanting more translations, different translations, and I don't know. I think it's been exciting, but I don't know. I think it just sort of shifts the way that you have a much more broader audience, and it's not just academics who are coming to him.
Oh, sorry, I said Mark.
Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah, I think Dazai might be happy that, this sort of narrative of his life is taking over and taking on a life of its own. As a translator, I don't know. I mean, it is an excellent question and probably one I should have thought about, but I hadn't. I don't know. I mean, I think my role as a translator is really that as a mediator. I mean, and of course, it's not this simplistic, I just take this unproblematic Japanese text and turn it into an unproblematic English text. There's a lot of interpretation. I mean, the translation itself is a reading of the text and an interpretation of it. But what the reader does with it at that point is really up to them. I don't think that's my job. And I don't think it, at least in the way that I think of literary translation, I don't have enough confidence in myself as a literary person to be able to dictate what Dazai actually means, you know. So I try to minimize that. In terms of what we choose to translate and how we present it and so on. Yeah, that will also have an impact, as for example, I guess the publication of his works with the manga style covers suddenly leading to an explosion of readership, and certainly the Bungo Stray Dogs phenomenon, which I know nothing about, and it's very confusing when students come up and ask me about Mushano Koji Saneatsu and so on. I was like, how do you know? How do you know such an obscure writer? But sorry, I'm not really answering your question. I guess for the translator, I just try to focus on not destroying the work. For me, that keeps my hands full. But yeah, how it's presented, I guess, is probably a big factor as well. Thank you.
It does make sense as a translator to try as much as possible to keep the voice, and how readers read it, that's up to them. I would like to move to the questions. So if anybody has any questions.
We have time for one question from in person and then one question from the chat. So please, if anyone has a question or great volunteer. No? Well, oh, yes.
I guess just project. Yeah. So in terms of Mark's translation of Negan's Friendly, I noticed that the translator's note was at the end of the book instead of at the beginning of the book. And I remember reading a little bit about your reasoning for why, and that you kind of wanted the reader to go into the book without this background explanation about who Dazai is and have that affect their interpretation of the text. And so it kind of made me think of how even not just the translation itself, but the framing of the translation within the book that is published, how that can possibly affect interpretation. And if I know, for example, in CMOS now they're recommending putting kind of acknowledgements and all of that at the back of the book. And I was wondering what all of your opinions are on how much does the reader really need to know about Dazai before you can dive into the book?
So bits of that were broken up, but I think I got most of what you were asking. I can't take credit for that. I think that was Peter Goodman's suggestion, the editor that I was working with. He's absolutely incredible. But yeah, I mean, I thought it would be, when he suggested it, and I think maybe he just didn't want to, maybe one of his goals was to, again, keep it really focused on a general readership. Whereas if you have this very technical introduction, it might perhaps put some people off, make them think it's more academic. I don't know. But I think it worked. I don't know. Whenever I read books, I skip the introduction and read the book first, and then I go to the introduction. That's because I want to read it, in my way first. So I think it's useful. So I'm currently working on a translation of an Abe Kobo historical novel, and I sort of doing the same thing. So I've got a brief introduction, because it's set in like the late Edo, early Meiji period, that discusses certain elements of that historical period, but then the more detailed discussion comes at the end. And yeah, I mean, I have my reading, but that's not to say it's necessarily the best, and certainly not the only reading. So it works for me. Sometimes it might, if a work is more esoteric, it might require a bit more contextualization in order for the reader to be able to really get into it and appreciate it. I don't think that was the case with Dazai's text. It stands quite well all on its own. Thank you.
Time. Let's move on to thank you, Mark, for that answer. We also have a really good question from the chat that I want to share. So the question from the chat is, how do you feel regarding the popular notion that Dazai is sexist or misogynistic? Often it feels like that point summarizes the entire book for people.
I don't know who would like to go first, but if I were to talk a little bit about that, I think if you were to think of his writing as a little bit misogynistic, then you may say that about a lot of modern Japanese literature. Read Kawabata, read Tanizaki. So I feel like considering how things were and how other authors were, it might be a little bit difficult to just see Dazai as that. And interestingly enough, if we look into his writings where women are the narrators, you do see them taking agency over their personhoods, over especially when it comes to a narrator who's a wife, for example. You see her kind of transcending what a wife at that time should be and taking agency over her personhood. So I always try to avoid the talking about Dazai and like especially female narrative or female first person narratives and the idea of misogynistic, and because gender studies and feminism. So I personally would avoid that, but just I would say maybe look at other writers. Yeah.
Oh, you're passing this to me? Okay. Well, yeah, you can tell that he's a sexist and he can be like misogynistic oftentimes, and that's why you never ever want to date him. But like in like general, like not only Dazai, well, some like works, especially from like centuries ago, can be like very misogynistic and like politically not correct. But that doesn't always spoil the work. As long as it doesn't like spread the idea, like for like this society, you have to like read it in a certain way. You have to take a distance, and you don't have to always like think that a novel, like a work of fiction, tells you something that is like morally correct, because sometimes there's like of course always like a murder or like a theft or some kind of like a, I don't know, like cruel people in the narrative, and you don't like, you're not gonna like expect them to like teach you how to live your life. You like have to be more objective in like reading those kind of texts. So I don't think you have to like stop translating or like publishing works that like deal with that kind of idea, as long as you can like how do I say it? Like read it in a certain way. But yeah, this is a very difficult topic, yes.
If I would just say, if I would just add to that, you know, it's a reflection of the society. I mean, it seems like the easy thing to say is that that's a reflection of the time, you know, like that this text is a reflection of mores and of society in Japan, and you know, it's not that different throughout the world, but that's what it gives us. It's not, you know, we can't necessarily apply the standards that we have now to, I mean, you can use that to choose whether or not you're going to spend your time with these readers, but
Sorry.
You're good. I just said thank you so much for joining us. And good night if it's late for you there.
They'll be staying with us for the second panel.
Okay,
Yeah.
see you then.
So now we'll be taking a 15-minute intermission. Please order food and drink if you haven't yet. And then we're gonna have a really great second panel with Moto and David about Japanese literature and translation more generally. So yeah, thank you so much to our panelists. Please, round of applause.
Yeah, I don't think I've heard. I'm not sure where.
You guys are so great. Thank you so much. Sorry that it's so like disorganized with everybody. Did an amazing job moderating. Thank you so much.
Well, we start around 12.
Yeah, 15 minutes.
30 minutes, half an hour.
Yeah, maybe more like 40. We start at 12:15. When it's time for questions, I'll give you a signal, and then I'll give you another signal once.
I probably like.
初めてだ、これ。This is the first time I hold two microphones in my life.
Mark and Allison, can you hear us?
Yep, I can hear you fine, thanks.
Welcome back. Okay.
Okay. Hello, my name is Moto Shibata. I'm basically a translator of contemporary American fiction, so from English to Japanese, but I also run a literary journal called Monkey, both in Japanese and English. I started to, the first journal I ran back in the 2000 was called Monkey Business. Then we discontinued because we ran out of money, and we started again. We got rid of business out of the title because one thing I learned by running a literary journal was there is no business in literary business. But things have been changing rapidly these few years. First of all, thanks to Haruki Murakami and the widespread translations of all his works. But at least in the English-speaking countries, publishers are interested in Japanese literature, what's going on in contemporary Japanese literature, and translators, the skills and the quality of the translations are improving rapidly. And there are some readers out there who feel that there must be something going on interesting in contemporary Japanese literature. So in some cases, there really seem to be some money out there. So maybe if I have to start all over again, maybe this time I get rid of K out of monkey. But I don't know. Well, but young translators and editors and publishers have, of course, a more realistic view of what's going on in the literary business, and I'm asking two of them about how they feel all about it. First, David Boyd, who teaches at University of North Carolina. He's a wonderful translator of contemporary Japanese, not just contemporary Japanese fiction. So David, how you feel all about it?
I'm going to try it this way. Can people hear me? Am I screaming at people on the internet? Is this very loud? Okay. Can people louder? Am I screaming at you yet, Allison? Okay, I'll do both. I wanted my notes. How do I feel about it? Hello. Can you hear me? Great. All right, we'll go with this. How do I feel about the business? Terrible. I think things are going in the wrong direction. I agree with everything you just said. Translators are good. They're getting better all the time. And if you let them do their own work, then they do great work. But I think that's pretty uncommon these days, precisely because of the money, right? The more that sales go up, people start just buying books on spec. So, not really on spec. Editors who can't read the source text buy it because it has a hook. This doesn't really have to do with the quality of literature anyway. Then they don't have a good Rolodex, so they just pick a translator at random. They're not really thinking about chemistry, right? So you're kind of wasting that good translator. There's not really an opportunity to have translators acting as artists, even though that they're fully capable of doing it. So that's kind of what I'm looking at right now in the era of like Cats and Coffee, is just nobody wanted to do those books. That the translators weren't picking them. Those are assigned to them, right? Like that's where the money is. So people are buying these books. And it's not just Cats and Coffee, right? Like, I'm really happy to see Kodaya's get picked up, and you both know more about this than I do. As you played a direct role in that, right? But that's not her best work, right? I think universally speaking, if you're going to translate Kodaya into English, you do Nagareru, maybe Kimono. She has some really good stuff, but it's Key that gets picked up because it was in a movie, right? It's just like things aren't being picked up for the right reasons. And then you have this kind of issue, right? A group of us, actually, quite a few of them are here right now. I think we were just talking about this, but kind of paratextual control on the part of editors, right? Where after they bought the book that they didn't want, then they need to turn that into the book that they wanted. And so, even if it's well translated by a person who really gets that book, it can become something else very quickly because kind of how a book is presented really does matter. So I'm kind of down on the whole thing right now, honestly. I mean, I'm not going to do anything else with my life, but
So what can be done about it?
I was gonna ask you that.
Ah, well, I'm gonna ask Leo.
But to solve all that situation, okay, okay, so you're like asking all the like young generations to solve the problem, right? What to do? Well, like on my side, like as a translator, I'm not in control of the like whole business. Of course, you expect your like counterparts to like handle it right, but you cannot like control everything. So what I would do would be well, if I find the right editor, if I am like lucky enough to get to know the right editor and like work together, I would like never let them go. I mean, I would love to like work with Eric again and do some other work and like some like Japanese editors because well, I'm a poet and writer myself, so I work with a lot of Japanese editors in Japan. Whenever I find a good editor that we find like a chemistry with and we like whenever we can like discuss some various things and actually know what we're doing, I would like love to continue to working with them. And I don't know, maybe that won't like solve all the problem, but I think it's like very crucial that you have the right team and because like publishing a book is really collaborative work. It's like almost like an art collective because the whole process is really an art itself. So it's I hope that nobody like underestimates that and like pay respect to like people with like different professions and work together. And when you meet the right people, don't let them go.
So with this Dazai book, you feel you've been very lucky.
Yeah. Yeah, I loved working with Eric and yeah, because we went through like the whole like three stories together, like line by line, and he made like all the comments and I looked back and we had like online discussions like multiple times and because well Eric is an English native, he's American and I'm Japanese, so we brought like our like knowledges together to tackle this like translation and yeah, I think we did a lot of work together and it doesn't like always happen. Well, sometimes you really don't like want people to say stuff about your translation, but I really trusted Eric and yeah, I think it was very good. And it's something that was like yeah, very lucky.
Okay, right. Okay. Allison and Mark have generously agreed to stay on, even though it's late at night over there. So I'm very curious to hear what they have to say about all this. Allison?
Thank you, Moto, and thank you all for allowing me to be part of this conversation as well. So to respond to Moto's question earlier about what's happening and what to do about it, and I feel some of what David is discussing, what his grievances about the current state of Japanese literature and translation. But I think something that's really transformed in the past 10 to 15 years is the number of people who want to translate Japanese literature and the people who are emerging and aspiring to translate Japanese literature. I mean, previously it was a very small group of people. Again, a lot of academics, and there are people who are, and I guess personally, I came to this work through publishing. I wanted, I learned how the industry in the US at least functions and tried to wrap my head around how it functions differently in Japan, but looking at it from the US and how books get brought into the market. So I was always thinking about it from a market perspective, thinking about, how the books are selected, but also what books are the readers are looking for, if they're, and that has transformed so dramatically in this time as well. You have such a wider readership, people who are willing to read literature and translation, period, and the number of books that are being translated from Japanese. So what I would say is that I really feel like these translators, this new cohort of translators, as well as the older ones, I'd like to think, should be much more actively engaged. I mean, we are engaged, but we should be given a role. A lot of times we are taken, we get to the table later. And so, the thing like monkey business and monkey is one of the, is a kind of vehicle for bringing more Japanese literature to and new writers to the awareness of, I think that's one of the things that, I remember talking to you about this when you were starting to do the international edition. I think, there are many more players involved now. And I think it's about integrating everyone in a more cohesive and coherent way. And it's very complicated, but it's also very exciting because it's like the pie is getting bigger.
Mark, can you hear me? Oh,
Yeah, my first reaction was you guys are getting paid. So yeah, I mean, I'd love to have the problem of there being too much money rolling around. Although I shouldn't complain. Dazai's done my Dazai translation did a hell of a lot better than I ever imagined it would. But yeah, for me, I mean, literary translation is never. I mean, I think for most rational people, it's not really about the money. But David's points are yeah, I take them to heart. I mean, you can see the impact that it's having, and it's, it can be good or bad. For me, I was trying to think about how I might respond to some of these questions because the whole business side of things is completely foreign to me. I shun it as much as possible. I like working with the text, and everything else I want to minimize as much as possible. Um, but I wonder how, we're going to fare in the age of far more advanced machine translation and generative AI, because I look at Amazon and so on, because I try to find texts for my students to translate in class, texts that haven't been translated. And they've all been translated now, but they're all AI slop, it's all rubbish. And my concern is that, a lot of people will read that, not realize that the translation's absolute shit, excuse my profanity, and then be completely turned off by it. So I used to think that, well, self-publication of obscure translation is great because these are things that would never get published professionally. But now it's kind of having the opposite effect, and it's just this sea of rubbish that drowns out quality translations that might exist there. But yeah, that's it for me. Thanks.
thank you. That's actually one of the things I try not to think of about all these machine translations. How are you responding to this huge change in the invasion of machine translation?
Oh, wait, which way to?
Yeah, I'll
Hello.
put it for you.
No, I've got it. I've got it. Does this work? Can everybody online hear? Okay, great. Yeah, I think we've lost. And not because machines are better. That was never the question, right? Nobody was saying, can machines translate better? This is again going to return us to the economic question, but AI is cheap and we're replaceable in that sense. And I don't know how many readers are really looking for that better wave of translation that you said is coming. I don't know how many people insist that it read well. You have to understand, I got tenure last year, so I'm a paid pessimist now. So everything I say is going to be really, really dark. Speaking of kind of the academic part of it, though, I would also say, Mark, and I hope you don't mind, that I think there's a certain danger if you are an academic translator with being oblivious to the pay of it, because there are other people, and I'm looking at, I think, 20 of them in this room right now, whose livelihood really depends on you caring about the bottom line there. I'll leave it at that.
Would you like to respond to any of that?
Machine translation? Well, I think the situation is like very different between like English translation and Japanese translation because well, Japanese is like more like spoken by like less people, much less people. So I don't really see much like English to like Japanese translation done by machine translation because I don't think it's actually like working better like in general, like not just literature translation, but like generally like wayaku is like not done very great by machines, and not sure how you can like really deal with this like whole situation. Well, I hadn't like actually realized that there are like a lot of like trash English translations around the world because I'm mostly reading Japanese, but Um, are we like actually like going on and talking about like whether like machine translation can like translate literary works? Are we gonna like go into that? Really? Well, my answer, well, for now is no, because it cannot. Well, I'm not saying machines cannot like translate literary works at all, but they cannot do it my way, because I like translated Dazai. For like any works actually, when I translate, I try to go and focus on perception rather than interpretation. That is to like recreate your sensory experience, like what you can like see, what you can picture from the text, rather than finding the meaning behind it or going for word. So that is like something that is kind of like between direct translation and kind of a creative translation. And AIs can't do that because it doesn't have a body, it doesn't have like your five senses. So you so I'm not saying like my way of doing the translation is the only way or the best way, but it cannot be done by AI, and some works requires probably like some different ways to get translated, like poetry. AIs cannot like really translate poems for me. I have actually tried to prove myself, but well, I don't know. This might change in the next like 50 years. I don't know, but for now, I translate better than AIs.
That's good to hear. Okay. Sorry, I made you linger on on such an unhappy subject. Let's move on to a happier subject. Some Japanese contemporary writers have been translated into various languages, mostly in English. But some writers seem to be scandalously sort of so-called under-translated. Can you think of any Japanese author, contemporary or otherwise, who should be translated more, David?
Do I get to go again before they go? Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of under-translated authors. I find that it's hard to name them in public because you're usually stepping on somebody else's toes. Like again, there's 20 people in this room who are like, I'm translating this person. Please don't name that person right now. I don't know who's on the Zoom. But what I would say, specifically naming one star translator who's doing amazing work right now, I would just say actually Yuki Tejima is doing great work with a couple of people who are criminally underread but available in translation, which I think is really the right way to go. So I would say Wataya Risa and Kanehara Hitomi. That both of them have work out in English, but the timing wasn't right in terms of this kind of attention, the current wave of serious attention being paid to Japanese literature. So it's just badly timed for both of those writers, but they're amazing and would have an amazing readership if the timing lined up. So I'm really happy that Yuki is going about paying attention to those authors who are out, because it's really hard to do that, right? When something is out, it's a very publishing is very slash and burn, right? So if someone's out and it doesn't look like they're going to work, it's hard to convince a different publisher to give that person a second chance. Really, really hard. But I think that's where, again, the talented translator and the translator's artist can really do some good work and say, have you read it in my translation? Here it is. And if you're like Yuki, you can blow some people's minds. And I think, I think that she's translating at least one of them right now, and it's going to be great.
Okay. I don't know how easy this question is to answer. But among the authors you have translated, is there any particular writer you feel, vastly underread?
Absolutely. Okay, so the answer to this 100% is Tatsuhiko Shibusawa. Stonebridge buddies with Mark. And I don't get it. He's a villain in Bungo Stray Dogs. He's way cooler than Dazai in Stray. Why don't people read my translation of Shibusawa when he's totally animated? He has this gorgeous long silver hair, I think. I don't watch anime, I'm sorry. But first impression, he looks really cool. I think all the anime fans should be reading that. First off, I don't really know what Dazai has to do with anime, whereas Takoka's Travels, the Shibusawa book that I did, I could see anime fans really being in. It's fantasy, I think they would like it.
Okay, it's published by Stonebridge Press, right? And the title?
Takoka's Travels.
Okay, all right. Okay. We've been rambling on a couple of things. Could you respond to any of those, Allison?
Yes, thanks. I do like this question too. I think one of the way that I've been answering it more recently is to talk about not lost classics, but writers. The writers who I think have been overlooked are 20th century women, basically, in a nutshell. I would say that when I first started engaging with when I started studying Japanese the first time I went to Japan, women writers were still shelved separately in bookstores, and so one of the one of the collectives that I belong to, Strong Women Self Power, our mission is to promote Japanese women writers in translation. And we started that 9 years ago. And in the landscape for Japanese women writers in translation is a lot different now. I think it's pretty clear, just with the boom that we've seen is a more accurate reflection of the literary landscape in Japan right now and for over the past 10 years or so. But the preceding decades, also there were a lot of very exciting, some well-established Japanese women writers who have not had any of this shine. And so it's it's a field that is ripe for the picking. And I think I think it's a matter of, again, what I was talking about earlier with trying to sort of get the industry players to align a little bit more so that we can sort of tell, maybe we translators can help tell these editors and the edit or the, we can work with the agents and the publishers in Japan to help promote some of these projects to maybe fit in or to fill some of the gaps in what's being published in translation now. That's all for now.
So, Mark, could you respond to any of those topics?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, I'm kind of a hermit, so I'm not really, engaged in the big picture sort of thing. My approach to translation is that I just start reading something and think, oh, this is interesting. Let's try and translate it. And so I've got a ton of translations that will probably never see the light of day as a result. But yeah, no, sorry, I don't really have anything meaningful to add to this discussion. So I'll just pass for now. Oh, I'll say one thing. I think not specific writers, but genres. So like Japanese historical fiction, and I don't say this because I'm just wrapping up a historical novel I've translated, or zuihitsu, these kinds of genres that aren't as well known, let's say, in the English reading world. It would be fantastic to see more of those. I try to introduce them in my classes and so on, and I love the way it confuses the hell out of my students because they don't know how to assemble them in their mind, I think. But yeah, thank you. I'll stop now.
Thank you. I think most translators would love to be hermits, actually. So I shouldn't be, out here speaking to people, but I should be in my room translating. Okay. Right. Shall we take questions? Yeah.
Any questions in the audience?
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you very much for all the presenters, but I have actually a question for Arik. Are you for One Piece?
Yes.
Are you for One Piece books? Yeah, because we spoke about translators as like taking active part in producing foreign literature in their own language, but actually, of course, the publishers are a very big role in it. When I first saw the name of your publishing house, I thought about One Piece, the anime and the manga. And then when I was looking in the internet, I found out that actually it was the beginning of the publishing house, right? Is it related or not? Not exactly. because now you have the section of modern classics, modern Japanese classics. How it comes together? These two.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to I'll answer this really
Oh,
quickly.
right.
I don't want to take away the shine from our panelists, but yeah, the One Piece were kind of unusual because we do focus on manga and light novels, but we also have this modern Japanese classic series. So One Piece books, the One Piece is not related to the manga and anime, but more of the idea of one world, one piece, Japan and America, bridging the cultural gap. And so we've always been trying to bring Japanese books into English of any kind. And so it actually started out as more like self-help books, Japanese self-help books, and it became manga and literature and light novels. So we want to do a little bit of everything, basically. And I think the whole ecosystem is collaborative in that the idea is that maybe there's enough good, like high quality manga nowadays that some of those people will start reading literature, and that we can have a holistic ecosystem of where Japanese books are brought into English in a way that's maybe not cynical and all about just profit, but about the holistic ecosystem of transmitting culture back and forth.
Okay, thank you. Any more? Yeah.
Well, Eric just talked a little bit about what he does as a publisher, and I've had good experiences with similar people who are very passionate as editors and publishers. But like David said earlier, a lot of us in this room are sad-faced translators. We don't really know how to deal with the publishing industry. So I think my question is mostly for Allison: is what do you think it looks like when translators get involved in promoting works?
Well, I mean, as a translator who's been fighting to be involved for a really long time, I think it's it's about the we're working to have our agency, I mean small a agency, like being involved. I think that the agencies and the publishers need to involve, like they need to recognize us as resources, the resources that we are, but also the stakeholders that we are in the work that we're doing. And so, like we're not just, very lowly paid laborers. And so I think that, it's a like it's not so much like yes, I mean we can do what we can, we're doing I think what we can. I think it's about we need to get the publishers and the editors and the agents involved in this conversation. We need to engage with them and convince them, and I think that's what's afoot. I think that's what a lot of us are trying to do. There have been some really exciting conversations happening, and I'm hopeful and optimistic.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Can I ask a question for any of the translators or panelists here? I'm very curious what the role is of what Japanese literature and Japanese stories can potentially contribute, so to speak, culturally, ideologically, even politically to the English language world. Is there something in Japan's perspective that should be brought into English and into your country? Or do you not think about that sort of cultural, socio-political contribution?
Anyone? Mark, thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think it's necessarily specific to Japan, but I think any powerful literature is going to force you to it reveals the limitations of the way that you look at the world, and forces you to imagine or conceptualize of things differently in a way that you hadn't even realized existed before. And in Japanese literature, at least when I'm teaching it in Australia or Anglophone country, it has a lot more potential to do that because of the significant differences culturally and historically. So when I'm teaching, for example, I tell my students to focus on the bits that just make no sense whatsoever. You can call them resistance if you want to be fancy, but yeah, the bits that just don't make any sense, like why the hell would he write that? And the initial reaction is to say, oh, he's an idiot, but he's not, or she's not. It's a famous writer. They know what they're doing. And so those are the bits that really show, I think, the limits of our worldview. And that's what good literature does, regardless of the country. But yeah, thank you.
Hi, hello everyone. Yeah, I really agree with Mark. It's not specific to Japan, but that's the job of translated literature, is to be disruptive and kind of radical. The problem is that editors love getting in the way of that, right? Like on that level, like they see those things that Mark is talking about right now, where it's like, hey, student, this is a learning moment. But if you're going the other route and you're talking to an editor, then they're going to be like, oh, that's different and I don't like that. Let's get rid of that. This really concerns me, which is why I'm happy to be sitting next to someone. Monkey doesn't do that, right? That's bilingually edited. I'm looking over at Eric over here and thinking, thank God that the editor is really looking at the text, right? I think that there are ways to get past that, but that's not normal practice. Like, I think it's the two of you. Like it's not normally done. So the translation becomes far less disruptive. And I guess in a way, far less a translation often in the editing practice and kind of just general process. So I hate to see that.
Thank you. Is there any question from the online audience?
Yes, we had a question. Oh, sorry. We had a question from the chat. If any of the translators or you as well, Shibata-san, want to share your favorite work by Dazai and why?
I love all Dazai's works in which his sense of inferiority is, foregrounded. My motto is when in doubt, disparage yourself. So actually, so Dazai's, Dazai has same kind of, philosophy, and that's actually too close to too close to home to me. But I basically I love it. Yeah. Okay, all right.
Real quick. Allison, Schoolgirl, by far.
Right.
So
Okay.
maybe time for one more question from the audience. Or, yeah. Anything else from you or any?
No. Oh, what's Okay, so thank you very much, everyone. This has been a wonderful day. So enjoy the rest of Sunday. Okay, thank you very much. Oh, this is Saturday. So enjoy the rest of your weekend.
There's a new edition of Monkey coming out soon. November.
In Japan in October. Yeah.
And the English one.
October as well.
October
Yeah.
as well. So new Monkey, and we have copies of Retrograde here. Please, 2,000 yen, which is cheaper than you can get it on Amazon now. So yeah, please buy a copy. Support our translators. Thank you so much to everyone, and yeah, buy more food and drink also if you're not satisfied yet. Thank you everyone for coming today.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.